Welcome to the Forge, my wanton wildlings. I'm your creepsmith, and I hope you like my work. Good evening, wildlings. Found footage films have been, depending on your viewpoint, either a boon or a curse to the art of cinema since the 1990s. Today's story takes up that banner in the form of a pasta about literal found footage that its discoverer can't let go. I Can't Keep This Video Secret Anymore by NefariousD707. Taken from Reddit's No Sleep page. Humanity. A dynamic species, always moving and changing, forever evolving and adapting to improve our lives. And when we move, what we choose to leave behind tells a story that reaches through time to connect with brighter futures, or sometimes a deep and terrible past. I'm an urban explorer, and last year I found this video in an abandoned house in rural North Carolina. To this day, I haven't the slightest idea what to make of this footage, but whatever is on this tape makes my skin crawl and my stomach clench. I keep telling myself that my eyes are playing tricks on me or that it's an error in the footage. But honestly, I don't have it in me to watch this tape anymore to find out. I've been over the footage, frame by frame, utterly consumed, and unless I tell this story, I feel like I'll never have peace again. I found the abandoned house my normal way, by asking around in dive bars, and I got lucky quickly. A bartender I spoke to sent me to this large manor house about 30 miles north, but definitely off the beaten path. Family infighting about 6 years previous prevented the estate from settling, and the building was just sitting there, abandoned. Pretty cool, right? Fuck my life. It took about 2 hours to get myself to the house, and man, I was not disappointed. It had everything. Old furniture, creepy atmosphere, papers, dishes, the works. The plantation-style house looked as though it was built in the early 1900s, with paint-chipped white pillars flanking a heavy double front door. When I stepped over the threshold, I was immediately struck by how aged everything looked. It seemed as though the previous owners had left in the middle of breakfast and never returned. Dust-caked dishes still lined the strainer, clothes sat folded on the couch in the front room, and plate settings sat on the dining table. Old shelves looked to have collapsed, spilling papers and boxes across the floor, and the mantelpiece had started to fall apart as well. Going through each of the rooms, I was taking pictures and soaking in the atmosphere. I nearly tripped in the kitchen and kicked what looked like a camera across the floor. It was a somewhat dated Sony model video recorder, definitely less than 5 years old, and honestly, I thought I'd just scored a free new camera. I scooped it up and continued my roaming through the house. As I was leaving, I moved past a very old, very rusty door near the kitchen. My hands were full and I was losing the light, so I thought, fuck it, I don't want tetanus, and left. I trekked back home, feeling pretty damn good about my day. I was excited to post my new pics and to see if this new camera worked, so I plugged in the camera and it started charging from a very dead battery. Once I'd finished posting and saw that my computer had picked up the new device, I opened the storage file. In the file on the camera were several new videos, named Connecticut, Norway, and New Video. I went ahead and watched Connecticut, only to find out that the former owner, named Miles, was an urban explorer like myself, but with some major differences. The biggest difference was a copious amount of drug use once he got to the locations. It looked like meth, but I'm no expert. Not cool, but it explains why he forgot his camera. It's a hell of a drug, folks. I even went ahead and found him online and looked through his pictures. Nice guy, just a lot of issues. Then I opened the file labeled New Video And that was when my day went from good to foobar. I'm gonna do my best to describe the video. I can't get it out of my head, and I'm starting to fear for my sanity if I don't talk about it. So enjoy, I guess, or go have a bowl of cereal and start your day better than this. The video starts with Miles driving down the same dirt and gravel road that I took to get there. He parks his Jeep in the same exact spot as I did before making his way up to the gravel driveway. Throughout the walk, Miles keeps up a steady stream of commentary to the camera, calling us his fam and narrating the scene like in the other videos. As he walks up to the front of the house, the camera spins and he stops, frantically searching his pockets. I can barely hear him say, "God fucking damn it. Shit's in the goddamn hotel. Shit. Fuck. Shit. Right. Well, let's make this fucking quick then, guys." Guiltily, I chuckled at him for forgetting his stash. He slipped through the doorway and began to wander around, and I was immediately shocked that the house was much cleaner than when I'd seen it. No piles of papers or boxes or clothes or any of the refuse tossed around as when I was in there. I later found out why, after watching the Norway video. Miles only went on adventures to steal things from abandoned houses. They call themselves treasure hunters, and they're the reason that my hobby is mostly illegal, so my sympathy for him was, at this point, quite low. After a cursory tour, he begins to ransack the place, tossing everything around, looking for something to sell. He pushes over tables and throws open boxes, throwing anything that doesn't look valuable in a deliberate show for his audience. After collecting a few items near the door, a sewing machine, few picture frames, some tools, he finally notices the tetanus door that I had mentioned earlier. I admit that when he tried to get it open, I got a little excited to see what was inside. Miles tries the door only to find it locked. He goes around the back of the house where a small window sits at the base of the building. The window seems to lead into the same room behind the heavy door, but it was incredibly dirty. He sets the camera down to find a rock and attempts to smash the window, with no visible effect. He slams the rock into it several more times until he jumps back and yells with the fresh cut visible on his thumb. He gives this up and goes back inside, cursing to himself. As Miles goes into the sitting room, he spots an ornate clock sitting on the mantel of the fireplace. Climbing over the piles of clothes, he awkwardly tries to pull the clock off the wall and loses his balance, tipping over backwards. Both Miles and the clock hit the brick base of the mantel with a huge crash. With a stream of curses, he stands up and inspects the clock before looking at the camera, saying, "Edit that shit out." He looks down at the wreckage of the clock. He cries out in triumph and reaches down to grab something. Then he stands up with a large, rusted metal key grasped in his hand. In a sing-song voice, he yells, "I think I know where this goes." Leaping over the clothes, he rushes to the big door and places the key in the lock. At first, the lock doesn't budge, and even after a frustrated grunt and push, the key slowly turns with a loud scrape. Even still, when Miles attempts to open the door, it won't budge. His temper sparked, he puts his foot on the door frame and wrenches hard against the door, and after the second time, it slowly starts scraping open. The door peels the paint off around the frame as though it hasn't been open in far more than 5 years. It only opens a few inches before it gets stuck again on some swollen floorboards at the base of the door. Then he uses his foot to press down on the boards. He strains against the door and jerks open another few inches. The floorboards begin pressing up again and wedge the door. It left just enough space for someone to fit through. Miles grabs the camera and goes down into the dark. Now, Either the camera doesn't have a night vision mode, or he forgets to turn it on, so the only light illuminating the room came from that filthy window. Still, the setting sun falls directly on the window, providing light enough to see most of the room in the video. The basement is a roughly 15 by 15 workspace with an old workbench sitting against the far wall, flanked by 2 bookshelves. Opposite the table are a set of wood-paneled closets standing open and empty. Miles sets a lantern flashlight on the top step facing the room before setting up a monologue for the camera. "We've hit the jackpot, ladies and gents. An old house in the woods, packed with loot, with an untouched locked basement and a secret key. Woo-hoo-hoo!" Miles says to the camera, complete with mocking hand gestures. "Nobody's been here for years. I've got a feeling that we'll find some choice prizes down here. This'd be perfect if I didn't forget the goddamn." At this point, he starts rifling through the bench drawers, pulling out old yellow papers. One of the drawers seems to have nothing but old newspaper clippings. He pulls these out and begins spreading them over the table. Obviously, they weren't worth anything to him, so he only glanced at them for a couple of seconds. I've been over this video frame by frame, and one of the first things I noticed was that all the articles had headlines relating to strange instances in the area. One said, flood collapses 4 homes. Another said, hikers still missing after 12-day search. And a third said, man arrested for manslaughter. These and the dates on the papers put the oldest paper at 23 years, the youngest at 7. At this point, Miles places the camera on the table, giving us a full view of the room from under the dirty window. He begins to search the paneled closets and finds nothing. Opens more drawers. Still nothing. All the while keeping up a steady stream of talking to the camera. Now eventually he turns to the bookshelves flanking the workbench, leaving him only barely in view of the camera. Apparently there was something at the top of one of the shelves that he found interesting, and he tries to reach for it. Finding the treasure above his grasp, he begins to climb the bookshelf's first shelf to reach higher. It holds for maybe 4 or 5 seconds before it gives out, spilling everything, including Miles, on the floor. For some stupid reason, he then decides to try the second shelf as though that's going to be any different. The shelf didn't crack. However, as Miles reaches toward the top, the entire bookshelf leans forward and crashes down directly on top of him. At this point, a lot of dust kicks up and catches the afternoon light shining through the window, nearly blinding the camera for a full 4 minutes. When the dust finally settles, we can see him struggling to get his leg out from under the debris, coughing, cursing, wheezing with each breath. At this point in the video, I noticed something. The door to the basement had closed. A notification comes up on the video that says low battery, 25%. And also at this point, something strange starts happening with the camera. Miles' shadow was much deeper than the ones surrounding him or from other items. It almost appeared like a solid black mass following him on the walls. It didn't act normally. The shadow would twitch from time to time, but that could very well be the camera running on low battery. In addition to this, the audio started a series of 8 taps every 90 seconds. Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-da-ba-dum. Miles didn't seem to hear the beats, so possibly that was just another glitch, but it sounded like someone tapping their fingers against wood. I've gone back dozens of times, frame by frame, and the dust mixed with the sharp glare from the sunlight blocks any view of the door, so I couldn't tell when exactly it closed. Then I listened to the audio from when Miles fell, and I could hear the distinct bang of the bookshelf, Miles cursing, and then a full 4 seconds after that, there's a slight scraping and a soft click of a lock closing, followed by another 8 taps, somewhat faster this time. I think that's all I can hear. Miles hadn't noticed this yet, and he was just uncovering himself from the wreckage. Amidst the stream of cursing, he stops suddenly and looks out of the view of the camera behind where the bookshelf had stood. Whoa. What the fuck is this? Some kind of picture shit? Miles says, leaning close to the wall. He picks up the camera and then points it at the wall. Most of it is in shadow, but the camera can just barely see the top right corner of what appears to be some primitive-looking scribbles representing either the moon or the top of a man's head, with dark shapes bursting from the top. Encircling the top half of the picture are strange symbols. Never seen the likes of it before or since. At this point, Miles turns to grab his flashlight from the top of the stairs as the light in the room was beginning to fade. That's when he notices that the door is closed. Frantically, he tosses the camera on the table, runs up the stairs, attempting to push the heavy door open, but only meeting creaks of the wood wedging the door shut. He turns, starts cursing over and over again to himself, grabs the flashlight, and starts searching the room for anything to help pry open the door. There's nothing useful, but nevertheless he tries using a broken shelf, a desk drawer, and a clothing rack to open the door. Nothing works. Overcome with frustration, he bellows out this primal scream and starts running back up the stairs. The shadows from the window are getting low now. All we can see is the flashlight dangling from Miles' hip as he smashes against the door with all his weight. After a few moments, he stops. He's panting, leaning against the door. Of all the points in this video, this one makes my skin crawl. As Miles leans on the door, something I can't explain or accept happens. Either he jumps back on purpose, or I don't know what, because the movement deeply unsettled me to watch. His body flies up and hits the ceiling before crashing hard at the bottom of the stairs. The way he moved has kept me awake at nights. It wasn't natural, but there was nothing to push him. I don't know what to believe about it. The camera is now vibrating faster at a steady 8 beats each 30 seconds. Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-da-ba-dum. Miles seems unconscious or resting for about 5 minutes before he starts to stir. As he stands with his back to us and the very faint amount of light shining through the window, I could clearly see 3 long scratches down his back. Maybe he landed on something sharp. That's possible, but these scrapes looked different. The cuts were wide and deeper in the center than at the edge, like how a bear marks the base of a tree. He reaches around and yelps as his skin stretches around the now oozing cuts on his back. I've noticed at this point in the video it looks like Miles' shadow, when he was banging the door, had burned itself into the screen or the lens of the camera. His shadow was still banging on the door while the real Miles was on the floor. Even when he stood up and the light changed, that shadow stayed banging on the door no matter how Miles moved. He didn't ever notice it, so it just, maybe from the camera. Starts screaming. What the fuck? What the fuck? Is all he can get out for a few moments. Then he starts rocking back and forth, saying to himself over and over, it's just the withdrawal. You're hearing shit again like in Cabo. You're alright. You're gonna get out of here and get that stash. When Miles was sitting on the floor, cradling himself, his flashlight suddenly turns off with a pop and plunges the room into darkness, except for the sliver of sunlight peeking through the window. It's close to night now, and without night vision, I couldn't see anything in the room. Panic just seems to overwhelm him, and he starts breathing harder and harder. Just the detox. Just the detox, he says over and over again until he's worked up into a panic. The light at this point has almost completely gone, so the only audio is Miles sprinting up the stairs and throwing his body against the door frantically. There's a notification on the camera, 5% remaining. Those 8 beats on the camera have sped up now, again, sounding like a phone frantically vibrating on a table every, 10 seconds. The next few minutes were awful to hear, and they made my skin crawl. The room, at this point, is completely dark. Miles slams his body against the door, over and over, heavily breathing, slowly getting more frantic, and eventually his cries turn into a manic, uncontrollable sob. His beating gets weaker and weaker until he's gasping for air, every ounce of energy pouring from him while he sobs, weakly, sobbing out, "Why? Why me?" Then, in a sudden break from the darkness, this loud, ripping sound tears through the silence like tearing fabric. The camera's tapping, almost constant now, stops, and the silence in the video is deafening. I can hear Miles sob and weep for a few minutes, and suddenly we can hear him shout, "What? Who's there?" More banging, and another short rip. "Get the fuck off me," Miles says as the camera picks up scuffling sounds and a loud crash, probably the other bookshelf. Then things go quiet for a while, about 70 seconds. I thought the video was over until a gut-wrenching, soul-shattering scream pierces the dark. I can hear Miles banging on the door with weak, feeble strikes. He begins to beg, asking mercy in the darkness, begging to be let go, begging for mercy, sobbing and screaming in turn. And then the battery of the camera dies. Now, I'm not sure what all of this is. I'm not sure what I saw. Could it have been a glorified thief with a drug problem going through a real bad detox in a creepy place? Definitely. And if I'm going to be honest, that's the world I'd rather live in. I'm not a believer in most paranormal things because, mostly, they're horseshit. I don't know what happened to Miles, but when I personally got to the building on my own adventure, that door was closed, and the clock was standing upright in the living room. There was no Jeep in the parking lot. And that camera was sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor in the back of the house, directly in front of that rusty, heavy door. Oh, ain't that just the worst? You find something that someone with natural curiosity just can't let go, if it weren't for that pesky self-preservation instinct. Well, wildlings, if you find anything like this, remember to document before doing anything stupid, okay? Stay scary, don't go alone, and make the most of your nights.